Hello, I am excited to bring back what was the very, very popular fail focus. It was originally something that Lou Walsh, the amazing Lou Walsh, used to do, and we haven't had any fail focuses for over a year now. I know that these have been really, really helpful to guys and girls when they are at your stage as a PDI. And so I hope that bringing this back will benefit you just as much as any PDIs previously would have benefited. A fail focus is essentially when one has been unsuccessful on a part 3 attempt and we have reviewed it and tried to dissect the feedback within the test report to try and make this make sense. Sometimes, not always, some examiners give wonderful feedback, but sometimes PDIs report that they were unsuccessful, they've had their feedback, but they don't really have a clear vision of what, why, how, and when. And we're going to help to try and dissect some of that feedback so that you can have a clear vision of what's what. Now, whether this is your fail focus or somebody else's, these are really, really wonderful, helpful videos for you, because it will give you a head start on maybe something you've done yourself. It will give you an overview of a real test with a real PDI and hopefully some real feedback that you can go away and get a head start on yourself. It might even be that you hear something that you think something happened like this. Something like this happened on my part 3 attempt as well. So we're bringing that back, and I hope that's going to be a real help to you. Just so that you have a sense of the structure of what this is going to look like. Generally speaking, I want the fail focuses to have some structure, and the structure is going to be, we'll talk about the PDI's feedback in their own, opinion. So I'm going to be asking, if you've sent us your test report sheets, I'm going to ask you to give me your own feedback as well as that, because it's very important that guys and girls take a moment to do some self-reflection, some self-review, and some analysis. That exercise is very, very important, and it benefits people just to take a moment and think. And just typing out what went wrong, quite often PDIs are saying to me, as I'm typing this to you, I'm realizing what went wrong. So I'm going to ask that of anybody who wants a fail focus. So the first thing we'll do is we'll discuss the PDI's feedback as to what happened and what their thoughts and ideas are. The second thing we'll do is we'll then discuss the examiner's feedback, their comments and their feedback on the day. Then we will give my main kind of bullet point things to focus on based on that feedback. And then the final thing is we will look at the test scores, and I will try and draw connections between the feedback and where the examiner has kind of taken points, if that's the right way to put it, from you. I'm mainly going to be looking for the ones, and I'm mainly going to be looking in the risk management section, because the ones will highlight to us the main areas with which we've maybe fallen short on the day. So PDI feedback, examiner feedback, my main thoughts and coaching points, and then we'll connect all of that together with the ones and the risk management section within the test. As I post this video, I will also be posting to you the screenshots of that PDI's scores so that you can kind of have a look through that as well yourself. But I really hope that this will be helpful to you and anyone. And I will lastly say that it's a very brave thing to do to offer your own test report for review publicly, because it can be a scary thing. It can feel like something that could be really intimidating to put your performance out there and have it scrutinized. But it's important to me that you all know I'm never going to be criticizing. That's not what we're here for. I'm here to look at the information and provide an overview so that the person who has offered this report for feedback benefits, and anyone else watching this content can also benefit from that. So with that having been said, let's start. So today we're looking at Ian. Now, Ian has provided me a wonderful detailed breakdown, and Ian, if you're watching, I'm going to give an overview of that because there was such wonderful information. I'm just going to summarize it. So Ian has a pupil who's had approximately 20 hours of lessons, and the plan with this pupil was country lanes. Ian says the pupil has had some issues with not making an appropriate speed, so too slow on bends and not speeding up when appropriate. Ian had planned a route within country roads that would be a 16-minute loop, and he was intending to do a mixture of guided and prompted instruction. Ian says he wanted to give confidence to the pupil to go faster when appropriate and slow down enough to keep control on bends, but not too slow. So finding the balance between when can we speed up and when shouldn't we. Ian said that he was extremely nervous on the day, although the examiner was brilliant at putting him at ease, but the session didn't really start well. He said in his brief he forgot to add clear roles and responsibilities, and that obviously felt like he was on the back foot from the beginning. He said that as soon as we started the test, we exited the test center and there's 2 mini roundabouts. He went over those roundabouts, and then a bit further up the road, he came to the 3rd roundabout where it started to go wrong. At the 3rd roundabout, the pupil and the PDI, Ian, approached the 3rd roundabout in the wrong gear, and as a result, ended up chugging towards the roundabout. So we were in 3rd gear, chugging towards the roundabout. As a result, we missed our exit, and we ended up doing loops, chugging around the roundabout in 3rd gear. Now, I don't know how many loops we did, but Ian has said we ended up doing loops, chugging around the roundabout in 3rd gear. Now, in this moment, Ian is thinking that he was worried about over-instructing, so he didn't say anything. That's an important point. I'll come back to that. Then we kind of came off the roundabout and we had a higher speed road, a national speed limit road. So we drove down that road for a bit, and then we came to the next roundabout a bit further up the road. And again, the same thing happened. Wrong gear, chugging around the roundabout, not ideal. And then it happened again at the next roundabout. So 3 roundabouts in a row. I think that's what Ian has said, that we've kind of approached in the wrong gear. We've chugged around the roundabout. It's not been right. So eventually Ian got the pupil to pull up somewhere on the left, talked about the importance of MSPSL, and also talked about the importance of selecting the correct gear for the speed. But Ian finally explained in this part of his feedback that he felt like the feedback was a bit rushed because all he was thinking was, I don't have much time. And so the feedback was a bit rushed, and overall he felt like the review of what had been going wrong on the roundabouts was a bit rubbish. Anyway, we carried on with the session, and it became very apparent that rather than coaching, Ian he fell into that trap of just speed up a bit, brake a bit, speed up a bit, slow down a bit, and it became a session about do this a bit, do this a bit, do this a bit, do this a bit. Pretty much, Ian says, he didn't really give the pupil enough support or clarity, and on the way back to the test center, a bit later in the session, we ended up finding ourselves on a national speed limit road. So this particular road was 60, doing 35 miles an hour. He did talk to his pupil about the appropriate speed for the road, but the whole thing took very, very long. And in the process, other vehicles were now overtaking us. Ian says, maybe I should have just got my pupil to speed up and then discussed it in that moment, now that we are driving at an appropriate speed. That might have prevented the car overtaking us. And then we had a cyclist issue where there was a cyclist on the road and we had an issue overtaking. The pupil didn't want to overtake. There were opportunities to overtake. We didn't. We took a long time to do it. And then it all became a bit of a mess. And in the process of that, whilst that was happening, we got a bit too close to the cyclist. And it was just, a messy situation. Ian finished by saying Colin was fantastic. Colin, the examiner, was fantastic. He said there were many positives, but I needed to get hold of the lesson very early on. And chugging around the roundabout should have been the first moment where we tried to get control. That's Ian's feedback. Examiner's feedback. So this is what Colin, the examiner, has said on the test form. He said the PDI presents a calm and positive attitude in the car for the pupil. Teaching and learning strategies were ineffective to enable the pupil with speed management towards hazards and junctions. Opportunities were not fully used to develop skills. Some risk entered the lesson with following the cyclist closely and poor feedback emerging into traffic. PDI has good ability to adapt and potentially support the pupil, further training will develop this. So I've taken that kind of paragraph and I've summarized it into 5 bullet points. Here are the crucial words that stood out to me in that examiner feedback. Bullet point 1, PDI maintained a calm and positive attitude. Great. Second bullet point, teaching strategies were ineffective in managing speed around hazards and junctions. I underlined that one because that seemed relevant. Third point, missed opportunities to fully develop the pupil skills. I underlined that point because that seemed relevant. Fourth point, risk was introduced by following a cyclist too closely and giving poor feedback when merging into traffic. I underlined that because that seemed relevant. And the fifth point, PDI shows potential to adapt and support pupil with additional training. So there's actually some potentially good stuff here, Ian. But there's some fundamental issues that are always going to make it difficult to pass if we don't get control. And that was the middle 3. Teaching strategies were ineffective in managing speed around hazards and junctions. Missed opportunities to fully develop the pupil's skills. Really important, fundamental. And risk was introduced by following a cyclist too closely and giving poor feedback when merging into traffic. So I have taken those 3 things based on, including with Ian's feedback, and I've got 3 things here that I want to talk about. So my main thoughts are, first point, when I was reading Ian's feedback, and Ian, you had such a wonderful overview of what had happened. As soon as you started saying the pupil approached the first roundabout wrongly in the wrong speed and we chugged around it and we ended up doing loops, I would have bet money that I knew what was coming. I knew that you were going to then tell me it happened again later. As soon as you said, I was fearful of over-instructing, I didn't want to be over-instructing, so I said nothing. I knew it was going to happen again. Because it's indicative, most likely, of a gap in one's knowledge, at least in this moment, in this session. So the first thing I would say is this. You need to ensure that you tackle the first issues, okay, if those issues are relevant. So I'm gonna read out what I've written. Tackle the first issues. You said about I'm concerned that I'd be over-instructing, and so I said nothing. And I would say it's only over-instructing if it's inappropriate or if it's unnecessary. If it's inappropriate and if it's unnecessary. If you're going overboard with it. So if you then said, we need to abandon ship, we need to change the whole lesson, we're going to go full guided instruction, we're going to go and tackle roundabouts and do this. Yes, there is a version of that where maybe it's overboard. But to say nothing might suggest to the examiner that you either haven't seen it as a fault or you don't think it's relevant. Either way, it doesn't reflect well on you. So say something. Don't say nothing. If your pupil has blatantly done something wrong and as a result it's implicated the roundabout, you don't necessarily have to change the whole plan. You just need to deal with it. And you could have dealt with that. It sounds like you had a route that had a number of roundabouts on it. So we could perhaps still have integrated dealing with that issue whilst addressing the country roads needs. In fact, if you're dealing with what speed is appropriate for bends, when can we speed up on the country roads and so on, when shouldn't we speed up, that's kind of it's an awareness thing, it's a planning thing that might also be connected to what's going wrong with the pupil on the roundabouts. It might be that there is a need for planning and awareness of which gear they're in and planning so that they can get it right. And it might also be that there are planning and awareness needs for the country roads so that we can know that we're getting the appropriate speed at any moment in time. So it sounds like there are transferable issues here, and we can still deal with this new issue with the gears on the roundabouts whilst still addressing the country roads thing. But the fact that we said nothing is going to reflect poorly, because either, as I said, an examiner is going to think, well, you either haven't seen that fault or you don't think it's a problem. And to that I would say this: if that had happened on a real lesson, ignore the fact that the examiner's there. If you had come up to a roundabout and your pupil had blatantly approached in the wrong gear and then missed their exit and then chugged around the roundabout, physically chugging around the roundabout in third gear, in the wrong gear, and then had to do a loop to then get back to where we wanted, would you have said nothing? And Ian, you and I have spoken enough for me to say I feel pretty confident that if it weren't for the fact that the examiner was in the back, you wouldn't have said nothing. You would have said something. And that's one of those moments where, and we hear it so often with PDIs, you know, I didn't want to get done for over-instructing, so I chose to do nothing. And listen, I get it. Over-instructing is one of those things that we hear time and time and time again. But it's only going to be over-instructing if it's inappropriate, if it's unnecessary, if you are doing more than you need to. So what that might have looked like, and I wasn't there, so I can't say for sure, but what that might have looked like was some kind of version of what went wrong, how can we make sure that that doesn't happen again? Okay, here's our plan. Shall we make sure that on the next roundabout we implement that and just make the fault go away? And we can do all of that, perhaps, if it's appropriate, we can do all of that while still working on the country roads. And as Ian has said in his feedback, there's a number of roundabouts here, so we can still deal with that. And in fact, if there are issues with planning and awareness on country roads that's causing issues with the speed, it might also be that there's planning and awareness issues with the roundabouts. And so actually you're actually working on the same issue here. If that's what's happening, I can't say for sure that that's what it is, but it sounds like that's what's happening. So you could have addressed that while sticking to the original plan. And I hope, Ian, when you watch this back, you can understand. I mean, I actually think you probably know that on reflection now anyway. But so many guys and girls are fearful of over-instructing that they do nothing. But when it's a substantial fault like that, you've got to do something. Just make sure it's appropriate. Just make sure that you're not going overboard. You're not doing too much. You're not taking away over-instructing might be that you overreact and now you've taken away all of the roles and responsibilities such that the session is no longer challenging the pupil. That's when you're going to be sanctioned for over-instructing. So perhaps on the move, we could have done something about that while still focusing on the session. Perhaps you would have addressed that and spoken about that after the first one. I'm okay with that if you need to, but we could have done something about that rather than nothing. And here's the real problem. The problem is that we did nothing and then it happened again. And then it happened again. That's where an examiner now has evidence that we have allowed this lesson to start descending into a mess because of our failure to address the original problem. So that's my main feedback here is tackle these issues the first time they go wrong. How you do it depends, okay? So it could be one sentence. It could be, I'm going to fix that while sticking to the original plan. It might be that we need to change the plan. You know, it depends on what's going on. But based on what I'm seeing here for Ian, we should have just have dealt with that when it happened. Make that go away. By the time we get to the second roundabout, it doesn't happen. And it could even be that if you approach it in a coaching way, maybe even then that supports you with your planning and awareness for the country roads. So we're also ticking some of those boxes as well in our coaching. The problem here really isn't necessarily how you should have done it. It's the fact that you didn't do anything, Ian. I hope that that makes sense to you. So perhaps you might have used Q&A. Perhaps you might have incorporated a plan into the original lesson. Perhaps you would have, drawn connections to the original plan or not. Perhaps you would have parked up and talked about it or not. But to do nothing appears as though you either don't realize the fault exists or you didn't think it's a problem. That's the bit that I want you to think about, really. I hope that makes sense. That's my first bit of feedback, is tackle the first issue. Whether it's part of what you were planning or not, make that go away. If you can do that in one sentence, or if you need to incorporate the plan within the rest of the lesson, I don't mind, as long as it's appropriate. But to do nothing is a problem, especially because then it happened again and again. The second bullet point that I wanted to review was, and this for me is the main thing that I want you guys to think about. Ian has expressed the plan was to get the pupil on country roads so that they can go faster and slower as and when is needed. But I would say, what's the actual plan for that? Okay, what's the actual game plan to make that happen? So I'm going to do country roads. My pupil has issues with knowing when they can speed up and when they need to slow down. Great. We have a need. What's the game plan specifically? What are we actually going to give and coach the pupil so that we can do that and pass on knowledge so that they can then try on their own? So I helped someone not too long ago who said, I'm going to do a country roads lesson because my pupil isn't very good at country roads. And then I watched a 45-minute video of the PDI and the pupil sat in silence just driving on country roads. And I reviewed after that and said, no coaching took place. You can't just drive on a country road for 45 minutes and call it a country roads lesson. You need a game plan. Now, either your pupil coped really, really well with that, in which case it doesn't seem to have been a need, or they kind of survived despite your lack of coaching. You need to justify your existence in this lesson. So when Ian says, my pupil has a need for country roads, I believe Ian, because I know Ian, we've had some conversations. It sounds like your pupil, Ian, has a genuine need for country roads. But then it got a little bit vague. And I want you to be specific. Okay, I have this need. What's my game plan? And when I'm doing country roads, these are the kinds of things that I'm thinking of that will format my lessons. So the first thing is, what's the need? What do I want my pupil to be able to do by the end of the lesson that would evidence progress has been made? Well, if my pupil is on country roads and they have nerves and anxieties and they don't know when to speed up and they don't know when to slow down, a really measurable, easy game plan is, by the end of the session, I want my pupil to provide evidence that they know when it's appropriate to speed up and when it's appropriate to slow down and how they came to that decision. And they won't just do that if I'm just saying speed up a bit, slow down a bit, speed up a bit, which is what Ian was saying it kind of descended into. So the main thing for me is visibility. So when I'm taking my pupils on country roads, what's the visibility like? How much can you actually see? That's going to be a real contributing factor into how we decide when we speed up and when we don't. If we're approaching a blind bend and I can't see anything around there and it's a national speed limit road, I'm possibly going to take that blind bend a lot slower than the national speed limit. But as I go around that blind bend, if the road now widens and it's really straight and beautiful visibility, maybe I'll speed up then. Those are the kind of factors that I want my pupil thinking about. What's the visibility like? But also things like, what's the road conditions like? What's the width of the road? What's the presence of other road users, junctions and blind corners, speed limit signs, weather conditions, road markings and signage, oncoming traffic, overtaking traffic, following distances, animals, farm vehicles, road gradient. I'm not saying, Ian, that you need to do all of those things, but certainly when I take my pupils on country roads, I want, by the end of the session, I want my pupil to be able to tell me when they're going to speed up and when they're not going to speed up and why. Now, it might be that they still need to, maybe they know when to speed up, but they're not quite fast enough. We can coach that. Maybe they know when to slow down because there's a blind bend and it's really narrow and visibility is not great. They know to slow down, but maybe they're not slowing down enough. I can coach that. But the first thing I need to do is I need to give my pupil the tools to know when is and isn't appropriate to speed up and slow down. Then we can build on that. Whereas if I'm just saying at every bend, slow down, and after every bend, speed up, that we're not actually coaching. And I think that's the bottom line here when the examiner says, teaching strategies were ineffective in managing speed around hazards and junctions and missed opportunities to fully develop the pupil skills. It sounds, Ian, and I think you've kind of already said this, we descended into this speed up, slow down, but we're not necessarily passing on knowledge or information. That's what I think we really missed here. So when you, Ian, are saying speed up, what factors are you considering that we now need to speed up? Is it wide and straight and great visibility? If that's what you're looking at when you're saying speed up, that's the stuff you've got to get your pupil aware of so that they can then, after maybe some time together, take on the same information as you and make that decision. And when you're saying to people, slow down, what are you actually basing that on? You as an experienced driver, Maybe it's a bend and it's really narrow and it's a sharp bend and there's no visibility and there's potholes on the floor. That's the stuff that you need to kind of extrapolate and put into your pupil's mind so that your pupil can then factor those potholes and bends and visibilities themselves. And so when we come to the next opportunity, they know how. But if we're just telling them speed up, slow down, they're just following orders. They're just like a puppet. Whereas we're not passing on knowledge. That for me is the main thing that sounds like we've gone wrong here. And if we got that down, I really believe that it sounds like if we had just really nailed those teaching strategies, this could have been quite a nice lesson. So that's kind of my main feedback with that. So I hope that makes sense. Ultimately, when you're doing country roads or doing any lesson, you need to ask yourself, what is the vision? How do I justify my existence with specific strategies? And what do I want my pupil to be able to do or to be able to be better at by the end of the lesson? Now I have that vision that I've hopefully formed with my pupil. What am I actually going to do to make that happen? As I've said, it just doesn't sound like we got enough of that in. So let's look at the test scores in particular. I'm going to look at the scores, the sections where we got ones. The first competency, did the trainer identify pupils' learning goals and needs? And the second competency, was the agreed lesson structure appropriate for the pupil's experience and ability? We got ones there. Again, did the trainer identify the pupil's learning goals and needs? Well, failure to address the chugging around roundabouts might be evidence of, well, we didn't really deal with that. That was a need and we didn't say anything until quite late on. And was the agreed lesson structure appropriate for the pupil's experience and ability? This probably has some stuff to do with if we'd coached a bit better, we could have got more out of the pupil. So we got a couple of ones in the first section under lesson planning. That is the first and second competency. I look at risk management and we actually got an 8. So you deserve credit for this, Ian, because you did pass the risk management. And that's really important because one of the first things I look at when somebody provides me a test report is what happened in the risk management. Because we know that we need to get a minimum score here regardless of our overall score. And you have overall satisfied the examiner that the lesson was kept safe enough, although there was a little bit of risk introduced with the cyclist situation. But we did get ones for, was the trainer aware of the surroundings of pupils' actions? And was any verbal or physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? Let me tell you why that happened. We had a situation with the cyclist. We didn't really get around them appropriately. We took a long time to overtake. And then when we did overtake, before we overtook, we got quite close to the cyclist. And then we did overtake. The examiner says that we might have implicated other road users, either because people behind us were being implicated by our inability to overtake, or when we did pull out those oncoming vehicles that maybe we affected. So it's normally going to be something like that. So was the trainer aware of surroundings and the pupil's actions? And was any verbal or physical intervention by the trainer timely and appropriate? That's what that examiner is talking about. You said yourself, Ian, we were going quite slow, and I tried to ask questions to get us up to speed up, but it took too long and then other people were overtaking us. You're absolutely right. On reflection, maybe let's just get the pupil to speed up and then we can discuss why in an environment where we're not going excessively slow for the environment. And failure to do that, I think, has justified this examiner's giving a 1 under these particular competencies. I hope that is clear to you. And then we look at teaching and learning strategies. This is where we got the most 1s. And I don't think this is a coincidence because based on the examiner's feedback, opportunities were not fully used to develop skills. It's not a surprise that this is where we got the most 1s. So we got a 1 for, was teaching style suited to the pupil's learning style and current ability? We got a 1 for, was the pupil encouraged to analyze problems and take responsibility for their learning? We got a 1 for, were opportunities and examples used to clarify learning outcome? We got a 1 for, was the technical information given comprehensive, appropriate, and accurate? And we got a 1 for, at the end of the session, was the pupil encouraged to reflect on their own performance? So teaching strategies, that has been, Ian, the main thing that the examiner has provided throughout this feedback. Ultimately, what they've said is teaching strategies were ineffective. A little bit of risk was introduced with the cyclist and getting too close. and we missed opportunities to fully develop skills. And that's what I've been saying about, let's get precise about what our action plan is, how we're going to justify our own existence in the car. What's my role here going to be to do for this pupil, so that by the end of the session, we're going to be able to pass on that knowledge and, you know, hopefully get an example of them handling a situation on their own. And it just sounds like we didn't go deep enough with that coaching. So I think I'm going to kind of bring it to an end there, because there's only so long you guys want to be watching this. But I'm going to post the images of the test report, and I really, really hope that this has been helpful to you. Please, as you watch this, if you've got any questions in the comments, use the comment section to come to me. Ian, thank you so much for sharing this, and I really, really hope that the feedback was helpful to you. And you guys know where we are if you need anything. As I said, we're gonna be doing a whole bunch of fail focuses. So if you can get a half a dozen of these under your belt before your own next attempt, you'll get some insight onto what hasn't worked in the past and what we could do next time to ensure a pass. So thank you for watching. I hope it helped. I'll speak to you guys very, very soon.